Hello, my lovely misfits. I am here with Saltine King, and we're gonna play a way out. But first, we've got some real talk about stuff that's going on in our life. Um, I've known him for God, how long has it been? Close to 10 years.
Oh, yeah, somewhere between 8.5 and 9.
Yeah. Um, so we've got a bunch of mutual friends, and uh, unfortunately, one of them attempted suicide last night, and it's kind of hitting us hard.
Yeah, it was definitely a rough way to start the day. Getting a phone call from one of your good friends saying that his younger brother, who is also one of your friends, has attempted suicide and is in ICU on life support. Um, aside from how it affected me because I know both these people closely. Um, you know, I hate the word triggered, but it definitely triggered something within me because I've been where his brother it was before he attempted. Um, I've been in the aftermath, and there's a long road ahead of him for recovery after this. Um, I have probably attempted suicide about 5 times in my life, and I've thought about it hundreds of times. Hell, it still crosses my mind, on a weekly basis. The difference between now and then is, you know, I'm I'd like to say I'm in a little better place, but that just seems really arrogant because I don't think you're ever truly in that better place. You just get a little bit better at handling it. It's kind of like how we joke about PUBG, Cordelia. It's you never really win. You just do a little better each time.
Right.
And I go so far as I've got the um, semicolon tattooed on me to remember that it's a choice. I can end my story, or I can end my sentence, or I can pause and reflect and continue on. And I know it sounds silly that a simple tattoo can mean so much to you, and that a tattoo can keep you alive, but there are a lot of times that I find myself looking at it to remind myself I chose to keep going for a reason.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't remember if it was I told you earlier today, or I think it was you. It was either you or I was when I was talking to the different members of my friend's family. Um, I wound up in a mental hospital for a while after the last suicide attempt. Um, I had swallowed a bunch of pills and got rushed to the hospital, and they forced me to puke them up, and all that. And then I was sequestered essentially. The county that I was in, and I think it's standard for most cities and states and whatnot. After a suicide attempt, there is a mandatory 72-hour hold uh, where they have to evaluate your mental state and mental capacity to make sure that you're not a harm to yourself or others. Well, my 72-hour hold turned into a lot longer because the facility that they put me in was more interested in trying to drug me up to keep me docile rather than giving me the help that I was asking for at that point. Um, I'm not a real big believer in pharmaceutical help, at least in a long-term fashion. Um, I'm I lean more towards um, the side of talking it out, having someone to go talk to. And that's just for me personally. That's not saying that there's anything wrong with anyone who is on long-term medication. There are some instances where it is needed. Um, but personally, for my beliefs, I see the medication as like a stopgap. Okay, there's something wrong inside your head. There's chemicals that are out of whack. They're off balance. So we're going to help you find balance again for a little while to get you to a point where you're quote unquote stable, so you can then begin to work through verbally whatever your issues may be. And that's what those drugs were originally intended for. Is they were a temporary thing. Unfortunately, you can say it's people's dependency, you can say it's a genuine need, or you can say it's the pharmaceutical industry just wanting to keep us all drugged up so they can keep making money. Whatever it is, these drugs that were supposed to be temporary have now become a permanent solution for problems that could very well be temporary, but have actually created a long-term problem in some senses. And again, I've got nothing wrong with them. I see that they're needed.
Hmm. As for me,
But
oh, go on.
yeah,
You
no, I
finish.
was actually just gonna say, but go ahead.
Uh, as for me, for a good portion of my life, I've been dealing with anxiety issues and depression, and I'm the same boat as you, not a huge fan of the pharmaceutical companies and using it as a long-term crutch. Short term, I think they're just fine. Something really bad happens in your life, and you need that little push to help you get to the other side of the tunnel, to get out, to get out of that slump or anxiety or whatever happens. That's fine. Um, I've I've had a problem with self-harm for a good portion of the time, where I've suffered from depression, and I've thought of suicide many times. Never attempted. I hope never to. But that the thought process when it comes to the self-harm is very cyclical. Circle. I'm not as eloquent. Um, but you just get into this rotation of, at least for me, it's I'm not good enough. Well, maybe I can make this better, but no, I can't because I'm a failure, or and it just keeps going around and around. And for the longest time, I felt like the only way to deal with that was that form of release. It was never a cutter. I would hit myself. I would hit myself. I was real active in high school. I played sports, so any bruises that showed up were easily explained away. But it's just not a pleasant thing, and I've learned over the years, yes, I do slip up, but for me, what works the most is just breathing. Being in that moment, taking deep breaths, sometimes on my own, sometimes with the help of, there's an app out there called Calm Harm, and there's a multitude of quote-unquote activities to help you get through it. Different things work for different people, and that app has a breathing exercise where as the circle gets bigger, you breathe in, and once it starts getting smaller, you breathe out. And it goes for minute intervals. After a minute, it asks, do you want to continue? I mean, it still continues, but it prompts you, are you okay? And once
Mhm.
the feeling passes, once you ride that wave out, it's helped me on multiple occasions. Uh, surprisingly enough, today of all times, but that's just a lot of stuff's gone on today.
Yeah.
And
Well, and the other thing too,
yeah,
I
go on.
was talking to my buddy's dad, and he said, I feel like I failed him, and I was like, no, you didn't fail him. You know, that this isn't your fault. He made a choice. Nothing you did leading up to this was your fault. Um, I'm hesitant to even blame the person for the simple fact that, you know, we've all at one point or another gotten to that dark place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the the issue is once you've gotten there, there's very little that can be done to pull you out of it. It's not that there's nothing. It's just that there is very little because you're embarrassed, you're ashamed, you don't want to admit that there's something wrong with your head because there's such a stigma towards mental illness and depression and anything that comes along with any kind of psychological disorder. Um, you don't want your family or your friends or your spouse or whatever to act differently or treat you differently or you know see you as some kind of fragile being. You don't want to be looked at as like a Fabergé egg. You're a person, and you're afraid to speak out and say something because in your head those demons that that you're fighting against and may unfortunately be winning at the time, they're going to keep telling you that, oh, your family's going to think you're weird. They're going to be scared of you. They're going to be scared for you. They're going to treat you differently. They're going to, react differently. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to tease you. I mean, all these things because, let's face it, you know, a chemical imbalance may be something that you're born with, but a lot of the times too, I mean, I was bullied in school growing up, and I'm sure a lot of other people were too. And I wasn't just bullied in school, I was I was bullied at home as well. My stepfather and my biological father, both of them, constantly told me, "You're not good enough. No one's ever going to love you. You're never going to amount to anything." And so those deep cuts at such an early age tend to stick with you as you get older, no matter how much you try to work through them. And they're still there, and so it's a constant battle between what you know and what you think, or what you're being made to think is I guess a better way to say it, because there have been definite times where I've been thinking one thing, but there's that voice in the back of your head that's telling you that everything you're thinking is wrong. I don't want to say it as like schizophrenia or anything. It's just that other side. Everyone has a light and dark side in them,
Yeah.
and it's a scary place to be in. And I don't wish it on anyone.
And it's one of those things that I wish there was some more help that we could be for the family. I mean, I know there's nothing we can do. It's all in the hands of the doctors and any higher powers that may be present. Hold on to your loved ones.
Yeah, if you see something, say something. I know it's so cliche to say that, but honestly, that's what it comes down to is if you see someone that is struggling, and the hardest part is you may not know because the final time that I attempted suicide, nobody had any idea that anything was wrong because you get used to having to hide it. You get used to having to hold it all in. You get used to putting on that fake smile. And for someone like me who is an entertainer at heart, man, that's like just putting on an old overcoat. You know, the old adage that the show must go on. There were times where I would go out when I was gigging with the radio show that I'd be hurting or I'd be sick or I'd be depressed. And all that gets pushed aside to go on and be that entertainer. You know, no matter how bad you feel, the show must go on, and you can't let the audience see you hurt or bleeding or anything like that. They have to see this picturesque ideal version of you. And the problem is, for a lot of us that are dealing with depression, anxiety, you know, whatever the issue may be, one, we get used to putting on that mask every single day, and two, it's tiring. It is the most exhausting thing you will ever have to do to fake being a functioning human being.
I and I mean, I know it's said all the time that, you know, if you're hurt and reach out, and I know it's not the easiest thing to do. It's basically
No.
admitting weakness in a world where weakness is the enemy, basically.
Hmm.
And I mean, you're always encouraged to reach out in situations. And if you want to speak to someone, there's always someone in your life willing to listen. If you feel you can't reach out to them, there are volunteers on helplines that are available 24 hours a day. If you don't even feel like talking, but you feel like you can text for help, there's crisis text lines. You have a multitude of resources at your disposal.
Well, and the other thing too is a lot of people don't realize this. They think that it's just somebody sitting on the other end. Most of the time, those crisis hotlines or those crisis text resources or whatnot, those people are people who have been in your shoes.
Been where you
You know,
are.
that's the biggest. Yeah, that's the biggest thing too. Is a lot of people need to get through their head, and I know it's not always hard. Um, or it's not always easy, but you're not alone. You know, you may think that, man, everybody else is walking around so happy, nothing's wrong in their life. They've got this perfect job, perfect house, perfect family, just this ideal life, you know, and I'm the only one going through this. No, I have found out, I've done multiple shows for mental health through the radio show. I've worked in the mental health field, and you hear very similar stories. Yeah, maybe one or two components of your story is unique to you, but overall, we've all been, you know, either molested as a child or raped in our early or later adult lives. We've all had a parent that's been abusive. Maybe not a parent, but we've all had a family member that's been abusive. We've all had a family member that, you know, is addicted to something. You know, we've seen it, every single one of us. You know, we like to think that we're each these unique and pristine snowflakes, that, you know, our experiences are wholly unique to us. But realistically, there is probably 1,000, if not more than that, people out there walking around right now that are dealing with or have dealt with the exact same thing. And the ones on those crisis hotlines, or the ones that you reach out to for help, you know, they're genuinely there to help you. I know how hard it is to talk to a therapist. You know, it took me a while to find one that I could connect with on a level that made me feel comfortable. And, you know, luck would have it, you know, the insurance I had, after a few months, you know, the company that she was working through, they no longer accepted that insurance, and I was kind of left in the lurch, which unfortunately happens a lot. But the time that I did get with her, you know, I'm grateful for, because she helped. She helped get my head, you know, not completely straight, because let's be honest, I'm probably never going to be a well-adjusted member of society. That ship has sailed.
A long time ago.
But that doesn't mean that I can't be a functioning member of society. And, you know, I make my lack of well-adjustedness work for me.
Right.
You know, and I found outlets, you know, video games, streaming, doing the radio show. You know, these are outlets where I can kind of put my problems aside for a while and focus on something else, put my energy and time and efforts into something positive. So at the end of it, you know, when I'm done doing whatever I'm doing, yeah, the negative will come back, but it's been offset by that huge amount of positive. And I think that's a big problem too, is, you know, our brains are wired funny. We're wired, we don't really remember the good stuff that happened. You know, we remember some of it, don't get me wrong. You know, you remember when you got married, you remember, you know,
Remember
when
on
you
your 10th
graduated,
birthday when, you know, your parents
right,
bought you
like,
those boy band, you know, concert tickets and you cried so hard.
I know, I was so happy to go see NSYNC.
Backstreet Boys. Um,
But like, we're wired to remember the bad more clearly.
because
And that's what kind of,
I think it's because in the old, well, way back, you know, before humans were as civilized, well, arguably, as we are now, you know, the bad stuff
the
is what
olden
you
days.
needed. Yeah, the bad stuff is what you needed to remember in order to survive. You know, remembering that going near that cave was gonna get somebody eaten by a saber-toothed tiger was something that you needed to remember. You
Right.
know, that's the way I've always seen it, but there's always good there too.
And I just, I want anyone that ends up watching this, whether you're watching it right now while it's live, or if you go back and you watch it uh, later, which I'm fairly certain you'll probably clip this in and of itself before we get into the game
Yeah.
proper. Um, I want you to know that you're not alone, and that any one of us here in the gaming community or in the streaming community has more than likely been in your position at one time or another. We might be in your position right now, and sometimes it helps to have someone to kind of commiserate with. It helps the other party see that, okay, you know, I'm in this bad position now, but I'm not the only one going through problems, because nothing is worse than feeling isolated. Reach out. You know, even if you don't feel like talking about what's going on, just reach out, make a connection, talk to somebody, talk about your favorite book, talk about your favorite game, share music interests. It doesn't matter what you're talking about necessarily. just as long as you're trying to continually make connections with other human beings. Sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes you're going to get people who, you know, they don't want to listen. But, you know, there's a lot of us here that are always willing to talk to you, always willing to try to be an ear, to be a shoulder, to be voice of reason, or a light shining into the darkness. However dim or bright it may be, a light is still a light when you've been secluded for so long. And I can't stress that enough. It's important to have someone to talk to. You know, that there's a lot of shit in my past that, you know, puts me into a position where I can talk to a lot of people about a lot of different things because I've been through the ringer. You know, I always joke that, you know, people notice that I always seem to have really good luck. You know, I can make things turn for myself if I really want them to. And I always joke that the reason for that is I had such a shitty start that the universe is just kind of trying to right the self to say, sorry, you know, we screwed up. Here, have a little magic. And, you know, it's not to say that I don't have to work for things, but it's the things that I put the time and effort to and the things that I work hard towards usually end up going better for me than, say, the average person. You know, and that's the only way that I've been able to ever describe it is, you know, it's just I had such a shitty start that everything's trying to right itself on the back end of life, which I hope I'm not near the actual end of my back end. I hope I hope I've got a few more years in there. But, you know, I do say this, though, having attempted to commit suicide so many times and having thought about it so many times has given me a quirky perspective on life. Yeah, I'm 35 years old. You know, Wendy and I, you're about the same age, right?
I'm 30.
Okay. So, if I were to die tomorrow, say I were to walk outside and get hit by a bus, or a meteor came crashing down and killed me, or I get mugged and murdered in the street, I'm okay with it. And I know that sounds kind of grim, but the reason is I'm happy with my life so far. There's been a lot of bad times, but there's been good as well. And I kind of wake up each day with that sense of peace of knowing, well, if today is my day, it's okay, because, you know, I did the best that I could. You know, I've helped as many people as I could. I've done as much good as I possibly could for the world and put out as much good as I could. And, you know, if I don't get to do any more, that's okay, because I've done what I've done to this point. And if, you know, I make it through the day and I don't get hit by that bus and I don't get, you know, murdered and I don't get hit by a meteor, then I get up tomorrow and in some way the next day try to influence somebody else's life in a positive way. My whole life, I have been a therapist in one way or another for my friends. You know, I've been that voice of reason that they come to. They don't always listen, and that's frustrating, especially when you see someone who's made the exact same mistake 12 different times, and they keep coming back to you like, why does this keep happening to me? Well, you keep doing the same stuff, and I keep telling you the same thing, and you keep ignoring it. You know, so this is going to continue to happen until you break the pattern. But, like, I've got a buddy of mine that's going through divorce right now that has been talking to me, trying to get his head straight. And, you know, he's had his heart ripped out by a girl already after, you know, him and his wife have split. And I'm like, dude, you need to not date. You need to just put it on the shelf for a while and get right with you and let the wound heal. So when you do go finally get back out there, you'll be a better version of you. You know, I've got my buddy right now whose brother is in ICU. I'm talking to him. I'm talking to his dad. I'm talking them off their own respective ledges.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the friends that come to me all hours of the day and night. I need advice. I need help. I need this. And I'm always there because there wasn't always someone there for me. I had to get myself through a lot of shit, and it might have been easier if I would have had someone, but I didn't have somebody, so I had to get through it one way or another. And I try to be, that friend that I would like to have. I try to be that counsel that I would like to have.
And that's
You know, it's
exactly how I am too. I mean, my ringer, aside from when I'm in the movies, is always on. Like, feel free to call me at any time. It can be 3:42 in the morning, and I will pick up that phone for you. Because, as you said, I've, you know, I've been there. I can, if I don't completely understand your situation and what's going on, I can at least empathize with you. I can be there to listen. I can be there, God forbid that if you need talking down. I will leave my house any time of day to come help you. Because I know it's not a good place to be. And if you're willing to reach out, I'm willing to be there.
Yeah, I've gotten called at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to go find my alcoholic friend that fell off the wagon because his wife left him. He'd been sober for 12 years, and his wife left him. And this is back when I still lived in Michigan, but he fell off the wagon and was wandering around the street somewhere. I had a very vague idea of where he was, and I got in my truck and I drove to where that was, and I scoured every side street and main road until I found his ass. And then I had to, damn near fist fight him to get him into my vehicle to try and get him home. I've been there for my female friends when they've been raped or taken advantage of. I have seen most of the evils of men. Man, I should say, not men, but I've seen a lot of those too. And like Wendy said, I may not understand exactly what you're going through, but I understand it well enough to be able to try to help. And like I said, I've not always had someone to help me. And in some ways, I guess it made me a stronger person to actually get through it. But man, you see the meme on Facebook a lot is, if you believe in that sort of thing, God never gives you anything more than you can handle, and he must think I'm a fucking superhero. Because I could bench press a Buick at this point. And even though you may not feel that you're that strong, it's okay. You don't always have to be. It's okay to be. It's okay to be what people consider weak. It's okay to be vulnerable. As long as you're vulnerable to the right people, and that itself can be tricky to find them. But it's okay. It's not a shortcoming to say I need help, that I can't handle this. It's okay, especially the biggest one for like guys is we've got a lot of the times you see women always talking about and discussing the unrealistic standards that society puts on them. Usually it's in beauty and how they look and everything like that. But what a lot of people don't realize is there are unrealistic standards put upon men as well, and that doesn't get talked about. And I'm not trying to to lessen the plight of women in any way, shape, or form, because the shit you women get put through is appalling.
It
But what I'm
is.
trying to say is that for guys, we're supposed to be macho, we're supposed to be tough, we're supposed to be able to handle it all, we're supposed to be strong, we're supposed to be, the backbone and the rock. And you can't always be a rock. It just doesn't work like that. It's men are afraid to cry, men are afraid to show feelings and emotions. I even have issues with that because I didn't see a lot of that growing up. I had one positive male influence, and then I had two jackasses that were in the mix more. And they treated my mother like crap, and they treated me even worse, and they treated my younger brother like crap. And you know, men are as fragile as women are perceived. I want to say that again for the people in the back that might not have caught exactly what I said. Men are as fragile as women are perceived. That's not saying that women are weak. It's just that society likes to think that women are the weaker sex. And men are that fragile. We have feelings, we have emotions, we hurt internally, emotionally as well as physically. We if you're seen as an emotional male, you're seen as defective. But the fucked up thing is if you're seen as not being emotional or not emotional enough, you're also seen as defective. So, I mean, that kind of messes with your self-esteem and puts you in, depression and anxiety and everything else that we've talked about, because what are you supposed to do? I've dated women who told me that I was over emotional. And then I've dated women who have told me that I'm not emotional enough. And that's because I'm trying to right the course from the last instance. You know, Ollie, for those that don't know my wife, she suffers from depression and anxiety. She's also on the autism spectrum. She has Asperger's. She's high functioning. I am as forward thinking and as compassionate as I sound right now. I have a lot of moments where my cold-heartedness and my lack of empathy are a big problem, because I function more on logic. It's what helps me get through each day. If I kind of push emotion to the side, if you believe in that sort of stuff, I am an empath, as well. And one of the biggest things that I had to learn, because you and I were talking about this earlier, Wendy, is that you have your empathic tendencies, which and the biggest thing for people who are truly empathic by nature, we leech feelings whether we want to or not. If I walk into a room and it's filled with tension between two people, I pick up on it instantly. And, it makes me very uncomfortable and tense. If going to the supermarket or going to any kind of store or out in public is a huge chore, and I hate doing it because I have to work so hard to stay in my lane. I can go out and feed off someone else's emotions and be angry for absolutely no reason if I'm not careful. I refuse to set foot in graveyards because that in and of itself, and again, it's whether or not you believe in that stuff, but I live it every day. I know what's true for me. I refuse to set foot in graveyards because there's so much different energies and feelings coming off of the ground that I can't handle it. I get immediately tired. I get immediately grumpy. I get immediately, 1,200 different things at once, and I just can't do it. And, it's problematic. And you have to be very careful when even reaching out to somebody, or somebody's reached out to you, that you have to be able to kind of compartmentalize yourself. You have to know your center. It's okay, this is my baseline. If anything beyond this baseline I start feeling, I have to understand that this is not me, this is what I'm picking up off the other person. And then after you're done helping, you have to find however works best for you to get back to your baseline. And that's the challenge too. But if you are suffering from depression, if you're suffering from anxiety, if you feel like you're going to hurt yourself, if you feel like you might hurt somebody else, reach out, find somebody to talk to. Because if you can talk it out and clear the air and get that sickness, I guess, or darkness off of you, it'll help. And it's not going to be a magic trick overnight, it's going to take time. But I don't know. I'm sorry, Wendy. I feel like I've dominated this.
But you've known me long enough that I'm more of a listener than a talker.
Right.
That's kind of why I'm glad I had you here to help out with the talk we're having.
And like Wendy and I, we've struggled all day, so.
But we've been there for each other, so. All right. Shall we get to it, or you got something else?
No. I don't know if he sent it to you or not, but
they're moving him.
Yeah. So. Yeah, if you want to send me the invite, give me a second, because I'm gonna mute my mic to let Ollie know. Okay. But I'll accept the invite, and just give me a second, okay?
Of course. I'm sorry, guys, if that was a bit of a downer, but I think it was something that needed to be talked about, if not for anyone else, but, for us. We hadn't been able to talk all day. We've just been Facebook messaging back and forth. So this was a good way to have some therapy and hope that we were able to help somebody out there. So even though we can't tell you who this is affecting out of privacy reasons, send good vibes, good thoughts, prayers if you're into those, good juju, whatever way you can. And hopefully he'll pull through.